Molly, Republican lawmakers are ramping up their investigation into President Biden. They're looking into obstruction allegations to determine whether the president was involved in his son Hunter's plan to defy a subpoena for deposition this month. If so, it could be an impeachable offense. Lucas Tomlinson is live in St. Croix, where the president and his family are spending their New Year's holiday. Lucas?
Mike, top House Republican committee chairmen have written a letter to White House counsel saying they're expanding their investigation into the president. We're going to read you part of that letter, which says, quote, in light of an official statement from the White House that President Biden was aware in advance that his son Hunter Biden would knowingly defy 2 congressional subpoenas. Here was House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer on Hannity last night.
And they can't answer a simple question. What did you do to receive the money? They also know that Joe Biden stated during the campaign he never met with any of these people who sent his family money, and that he had a wall between the government and his family's shady business schemes.
And here's our own Peter Doocy with an exchange with White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre earlier this month about Hunter Biden defining that subpoena and what his father knew about it.
The president was familiar with what Hunter was going to say today. Look, he's proud of his son. He and the First Lady are proud of his son, how he's rebuilding his life back. He's going to focus on what is needed on the American people.
Hunter Biden faces his first trial in court on January 11th. He makes his first court appearance on those tax charges. Of course, isn't the first time family members of the president have made money. Recall Billy Carter made a lot of money on Billy Beer and hawking and selling that good old boy persona, all pretty harmless stuff. He then later accepted $220,000 from Libyan dictator Muammar Gaddafi and made several trips to Libya, Mike.
Lucas Tomlinson with the backdrop of the day in St. Croix. Lucas, thanks very much. Molly?
Let's bring in Rich Lowry. He's the National Review editor-in-chief. Thanks for being here. Happy New Year to you. I want to start by getting your reaction.
I'd rather be in St. Croix, but it's good
I know,
to be here.
right? We're all so jealous, right? That's okay. We got a pretty good perch here. The House GOP probe. Now they're delving into what President Biden may have known regarding what Hunter did the day he did not actually go into the deposition that he was called to attend there on Capitol Hill, where Hunter went and he gave kind of this speech and then disappeared, and everyone was like, where did Hunter go? So they want to know if the president knew about it, was he involved in it? And the thought here is that could be kind of a contempt of Congress sort of angle and lead to a potential impeachable offense. Your thoughts on that angle?
Well, we can assume that the president knew everything Hunter was going to do. I mean, it's extremely sensitive matter with major political implications. Of course, the president knew. I think, though, making this part of the impeachment is probably a stretch. You know, it's sort of contempt of Congress by proxy, which is not as serious as the core of this investigation, which is the money. And the investigation has been a major success, unearthing these millions of dollars that went sluicing into Hunter's accounts, the family's accounts, and some of it we now have checks, you know, from the context of a year ago, have been utterly shocking, checks to Joe Biden from his brother and from Hunter, including $40,000 of a $400,000 tranche of money from China, which is 10%, you know, which is the 10% for the big guy that we've heard, various talk of over the years. So I think that's the main thing. That's the core of it. And this feels good.
I think you raise exactly the point that I've been thinking about when I saw that this was an angle under approach that the GOP was taking. They essentially, the Oversight Committee chairs, James Comer and Chairman Jim Jordan, they essentially write a letter to the White House counsel and kind of complaining. They say Ms. Jean-Pierre declined to provide any further details about the president's actions on whether the president approved of his son defying congressional subpoenas. Why take this angle where, as you mentioned, there's all of these other things, that paperwork that they've been revealing and documents and phone calls and things like that? So why take this angle?
Yeah, well, again, I do not think it's the main thing, but I think there's a case that turnabout is fair play. The Democrats went after Don McGahn, the former White House counsel, and others in a major way to know what they advised Trump to do during the Mueller investigation, when Trump was considering various means of being highly uncooperative. And this was a big deal, and they tried to make a huge stink out of it, and it dragged on for months and months and months. So I think the Republicans are probably thinking turnabout is fair play. And, contempt of Congress is not a minor matter. So I think it's disgraceful that Hunter showed up, just outside the door, but wouldn't actually go inside the door and comply with the subpoena. Now, it doesn't mean he has to testify, right? He probably would have taken the fifth if he actually showed up, but it is disgraceful. So they're going to squeeze every ounce they can out of it. But again, this is not, if Joe Biden ends up being impeached, this is not going to be the main count.
Quick to the other side of the aisle, there's something that GOP in Colorado are working on. They're asking the U.S. Supreme Court to overturn this ruling disqualifying Trump from the 2024 ballot. The Colorado Republican Party, this petition they write, says by excluding President Trump from the ballot, the Colorado Supreme Court engaged in an unprecedented disregard for the First Amendment right of political parties to select the candidates of their choice and an usurpation of the rights of the people to choose their elected officials. Your thoughts?
Well, they're absolutely right. And this is one criticism you can make of that decision. There are many others you can make. And there's no way it's going to stand. The Supreme Court will take this up. It has to, right? It can't have, we can't have other states kind of aping Colorado and have it up for grabs whether the leading Republican candidate's going to be on the ballot in a bunch of states or not. And the Supreme Court will strike it down. The Colorado decision is deeply flawed on many grounds, foremost of which is just a bad interpretation of the 14th Amendment. I mean, this provision of the 14th Amendment is supposed to involve, active engagement in a real, no kidding, civil war, insurrection against the United States government, and giving a speech, even if you don't like it, on January 6th, doesn't constitute that. So this will not stand.
Eyes on the Supreme Court on this one. Rich Lowry, thank you so very much for your thoughts this morning.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. Happy New Year to you.
I'm Steve Ducey.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.